Hey guys, welcome back. This is the lecture number 61 from our bootcamp series. In the last lecture, we discussed about polymorphic association in Rails, and in this lecture, we will discuss about active record callbacks. We will learn here that what are the active record callbacks and when and how to use them. So let's start with the active record callbacks. So callbacks are methods that get called on certain moments of a life cycle. Life cycle of an object consists of stages like where an object is validated, created, updated, saved, and deleted. And using callbacks, you can perform specific operations on an active record callback. So let's start using a callback, and we will just implement this callback for an example only, and then we will see the types of callbacks available in the rails and how we can use them. So before going for that, we will first implement a sample callback. Okay, so before using an active record callback, first we have to register that callback into the model. Okay, since we are discussing about active record callbacks here, so we need to register such callbacks into the model. Okay, so let's open your model. Any model you can open, like here you can see that I have a student model already, and we have a lot of models like student courses, blogs, demos, sub demos. So you can do this inside any kind of model. So let's start with demo, because we are just using an example callback here. So we will try this implementing in demo model. Okay, so first we have to register our callback. And how we can register our callback, that we need to use an available callback, and then we can provide a method name to that callback. Okay, so here we will use before create, and then we will append a method to we will define a method for this callback, that is greetings message. Okay. Now we have defined this method, and now we need to implement this method for mentioning what we want to execute for this callback, or for this before create callback. So let's define this method, have greeting message, and into this method let's put some message. And this message can be like let's say, hey, I will run. Sorry, let's make a space here. I will run before you create an object. Just save your callback. And now, since we have saved our callback, so now we need to go to rails console, and we will create a demo object. Okay, or object for the demo model. Let's open the rails console here. In this rails console, let's initialize a demo model. Sorry, demo equal to demo.new. Okay, now you can see that we have initialized demo with everything is nil right now. So let's provide demo dot name here. Let's say example demo, and demo dot description here, example demo description. Now we need to save the demo. Okay, so you can see that hence we call this demo.save, or we go for the creating the demo. You can see that we are seeing the output of the callback first before transaction is begun. Okay, it means that we have executed this callback on before create. Here you can see we executed this callback on before create, that's why we got the output before the query inserted. okay, or before the transaction begin. Okay, now you can do the same thing in different way as well. Just because we have a single line of expression here that we want to execute on this callback, so you can simply do this like let's say create, and just replace this by do and remove this line. Okay, you can use this macro syntax as well to define your callbacks, but remember one thing that use this syntax only when you have single line of expression in your callback. If there are multiple lines or if there are conditional statements, then you should register your callback via defining some method. But let's see this syntax as well. So now we have before create macro, and let's restart the console. Okay, and we will create a demo now. Demo equal to demo dot create. Don't be confused that here I just initialize the demo and then I'm trying to save the demo, and here I'm directly creating the demo by using demo.create method. So you can use anything, whatever you want, but this is for mainly saving a object, and you can use this save method with while you updating an existing demo instance or updating an existing active record instance as well. But this is for only creating, so I'm just going for demo.create here. Okay, you can use whatever you want. After initializing, you can invoke the save method. That's perfectly fine. Okay, so let's say name, another example, and description, another description. Okay, now when you hit the save or when you hit the enter, you can see that again the same callback will be executed before your transaction begin, and before the transaction to create the demo begins, we can see the output of this callback here. Okay, so you can register your callback by both of the syntax and both are fine. So let but I would not prefer this syntax because this is not a good practice to write such kind of callbacks, because most of the times we will realize that our callback actions will have more than one line of expressions or more than one line of logic. So that's why let's make this practice to okay to register your callbacks. Okay. So we have seen that how we can register and use our callbacks. Now, okay, now we will see all the available callbacks inside the Rails. So there are certain life cycle stages that we already discussed, that creating an object, updating an object, and deleting an object. And for every stage, Rails provide a different kind of way callbacks for performing on an object. So you can see here on my screen that callbacks executed when you try to create an object. Then there are so many callbacks available like before validation, after validation, before save, around save, before create, around create, after save, and after commit. So before validation and after validation works when you create an object, and when object is going to be saved into the database, it's all the validations available for or applied to that object will be checked, and then your callback will perform certain action that you define in your before and after validation callbacks. Before save will be executed when you try to save a database. Okay, just like we use the before create callback here, we can do the same thing with before save as well. Why? Because your object is not saving into the database, it is instantiated only. Okay, and around save, before create we already saw, around create, and after create, after save, and after commit. Here are callbacks that you can execute when you try to update an existing object, that before validation and after validation both will be executed on create and update. Why? Because whenever you try to create an object, you are trying to update the database. That means you are trying to update the state of the model into the database. When you try to update an instance, you always try to update the schema. Why? Because when you create, you are saving a new information, and when you update, you are trying to save an existing information. And validation applied on both stages, like when you create an student sorry, when you create an object and when you update an object. So for updating an object, you also have some similar callbacks like before validation, after validation, before save, around save. Okay, only these three callbacks will be different, like before update, around update, and after update. Just like before create, around create, and after create. Because it is mentioned that create an update action, so it will only works when you try to either create or update. Okay, and again the after save and after commit will work on both create and update, but after commit also works for create, update, and destroy as well, and after rollback too. And these are the callbacks which will get executed when you try to delete an object. Okay, so before destroy, around destroy, after destroy, these three are only available for deleting an object. And after commit and after rollback, just like create and update, is also available for deleting an object from the database. Okay, now you can see the list of common callbacks. So for create, update, and delete, what is the common callback? So there are two common callbacks, after commit and after rollback. Okay, but for create and update, there are more than two, three callbacks which are available, like before validation, after validation, before save, around save, and after save. Okay, because validation always get invoked whenever you try to update an existing record, or sorry, update an existing object, or instantiate or and try to save that newly object into the database. Okay, then validation get invoked. And whenever you update an existing instance or creating a new instance, it means you are trying to save something in your database. So that's why before validation, after validation, before save, around save, and after save will work on create and update. Okay, now it's time to implement some callbacks into our application. Okay, and we already saw the uses of before create callback by displaying a greeting message. Now we will see the uses of after create. Okay, now let's go to a project folder. Here we have implemented before created callback and a greeting message. Okay, oh sorry, let's this. Okay, we need to define, keep this method as well. If now it's complete. Now we will use implement the after create callback inside the student model. Okay, now let's check the schema first, that what we have in our students model. Okay. In a student model, that you can see that I have a date attribute, sorry, a date of birth attribute of type date, and I will create a callback which will display the age of the student if date of birth is present, else it will display a message that age cannot be calculated because date of birth is not present. Okay, so now let's implement an after create callback inside the student model. After create, and you can name the method like display student age. Now we need to implement this method. Here you need to understand that this is called the callback registration, and this is for implementing the method for which you assigned for callback. Okay, and in this method you have to check that whether the date of birth for that student is present or not. Okay, so if self dot date of birth, Right? Then we have to calculate the age. Okay, so age equal to, let's say, date dot today dot year minus date of birth. Okay, we will reduce the date of birth year from the today's date year from the current date's year. Okay, now if we have date of birth present, then display the message that puts age of the student is, let's say, age here. Okay. Now, let's print the else block here and print the message here as well, the dashed line. Okay, now let's print here. It cannot be calculated without date of birth. Okay, and save it. But before, so let's add some dashed lines with this message as well. Okay. Now we registered the callback and we implemented the callback method as well. Okay. Let's make it self here. Now restart the console. D and open this console again, and now we will create an student. So before creating the student, that you can see that first name, last name and email is required. Okay, because we implemented a presence to validation on these attributes. Now let's create an student. Student dot create, add first name to this student, let's say Ravi, last name Shab, and email can be like ravi at the rate sample.com. And now create the student without date of birth. Okay, submit it. Okay, so here you can see that after creating the message, okay, after create callback we have registered here, and after creating the student you can see that first the transaction begins and the student is saved into the database, and then we can see this callback action performed here. Okay, so it is displaying age cannot be calculated without date of birth. Now let's create another student and provide a date of birth here. Date of birth, let's say date of today minus 30 dot years. Okay, here you can see the date age of the student is 30, and you can see the value of date of birth is 1992 1 and 26. Okay, so it has calculated the age of the student. It means that it's how the after create callback has worked here. Okay, so after create callback only works first your transaction begins, then your record or instance saved into the database. Okay, and before committing the transaction, after create callbacks executed. Okay, and you can do the same thing with update as well, after update as well. Okay, let's say if you try to implement the same callback here, say let's replace this update by a create by update. Reload your console. Student first dot update. Let's say email student at that example.com. Okay, here you can see that I have changed the callback from after create to after update. Then you can see that this is displaying age cannot be calculated without date of birth. Now, if I provide date of birth to this student, let's provide some random date here. Let's say 1902 and 2002 dot to date because it's a string. Here you can see that the age of the student is 20. Okay, it means that what I'm doing here is that 19 February 2002, so it is subtracted from the 22, and here you can see that after updating the student instance, it is the callback is get executed, and you can see the message here. So what we can conclude here that after create will work. First, the transaction begins, record inserted into the database, and then after create callback works, and after update in same fashion, first transaction begins, then the update made to the database and updated entry saved into the database, and then your callbacks get executed. Okay, the same thing. Now we can use the same thing after save as well. I initially said that after save works for both updating and creating an student. Okay, so after save will work here. Save the model and reload the console. Okay, now save it. Here you can see the callback get executed even nothing has been changed. Why? Because we are trying to update the same entry. Okay, so the transaction does not begins and no update query fires. Okay, now let's try to change it. Let's say make it 1. Okay, and here you can see the age of student is 21. Now let's try to create any student. When you create it, you can see that this is also executed on create as well and update as well. It means that after save works on both creating an student and deleting an sorry, creating an student and updating an student. Okay, so the same fashion you can apply with the before create, before update, and before save as well. Before create only works when you try to create an object. Okay, and before update only works when you try to update an existing record, and before save works for both create and update. And why? Because we have tried it, we are trying to save the entry or save the information into database whenever we try to create a new object and whenever we try to update a new object. Okay, and there is a callback which works for all create, update, and destroy, which is known as after commit. Okay, so we can use the same callback with after commit as well, but that will executed once the transaction is commit. Here you can see the selected line. Once this line you can see the commit transaction, then your callback will get executed. Okay, now let's try to see this. Make it commit and save. Reload the console. Let's try to create an student. Okay, so here you can see your transaction begins, an insert query fired, record saved to the database, and transaction committed. And after commit, you can see that it is displaying the age of the student. Same you can find then do with the update as well. Here you can see. Let's make some changes because it will not reflect it. Let's make it 2000. Here you can see you made an update to the existing student, that transaction first initiated begins, and then update query fires, and then transaction committed, and then your callback get executed. Okay, now you can do the same thing, try the same thing with destroy as well. So Let's delete the first student dot first install. Okay, just because we have a courses model here, so we cannot delete this because it will violate the foreign key constraint. So, but here you can see that first it will delete. Let's me delete the student dot last. See if it has courses. Okay, it has no courses, so we can delete this. Class dot destroy. So here you can see that I have deleted the student which do not violating the foreign key constraint here because it does not have any courses available. And you can see the transaction begins, a delete query fires, okay, and the student is deleted from the database, transaction committed, and the callback get executed here. Okay, so what we can conclude that after commit works for both, for all create, update, and delete. Okay, so that's the brief about the active record callbacks, and there are so many callbacks that you can apply as per your need, and you can get more idea and detailed explanation about active record callbacks from the Rails guides callback documentation. Let me open here that how you can visit this guide and you can read more about here callbacks here, and you can practice more, and you can see or other callbacks as well, like after initialize and after find, which I did not mention there, and after touch as well, because they are rarely in used, because most of the times we have to play with the create, update, and commit callbacks as well. That's why I did not mention in that, but yeah, if you wish you can perform, and you can also see that on what instances or one or on what life cycle stages we run the active record callbacks, and at what stages we can skip the callbacks as well, or at what stages callbacks can get skipped. So you can check that as well, and here you can find the relational callbacks as well. Okay, and you can execute conditional callbacks as well, just like this. Okay, so just follow the guide and you can google it, and I will also share the link of the document in the description. Okay, but and you can find from the description, but before leaving we have some questions that we can recall based upon the discussion we had in this lecture. So first question is, what do you mean by callback? So this is the very basic question, and you must know, if you have covered the active record models and you can perform CRUD operations and all that, then you must have idea about active record callbacks, because it is expected by a moderate developer or a 1 year to 6 month developers, that they must have idea about callbacks. And what are the common callbacks used for all create, update, and deleting an object? So after commit and after rollback. And what are the common callbacks used for both create and update? So before validation, after validation, before save, around save, and after save. Okay. And the fourth question is, what is the difference between after save and after commit callback? So we just saw that after save only works for both create and update, but after commit works for both works for all create, update, and delete. And what is the difference between after save, after create, and after update callback? So after save works for both create and update. Create works only for create, and update only works for update. Okay, so that's all from this lecture. Okay, and you can try these callbacks at your own end, and if you feel any doubt, or if you stuck anywhere, you can let me know through the comment section. I will be happy to help you. Okay, so thanks for watching this. Let's meet into the next lecture. Till then, tata, goodbye, take care, and stay safe.